Session 72 of the Law of One. Let's talk here about negative interference. Let's interfere. We're going back to the discussion about psychic greeting, or the psychic attack, as Ra called it, and Ellen research called it greeting. And it's helpful that you know what happened in session 68 or so, when Carla was tempted by the negative entity of fifth density origin to be displaced into negative time space. I won't recap that because I've talked about it for a while already. So something like that is going to happen here. We're going to talk about this and some insights into what this all means. And then I'm going to give you, of course, my opinions on it, because I have my own ideas as to how to interpret all of this. It's not the ultimate interpretation, of course. This is a good time to remind you that everything that I say here is just my opinion, my speculation, my interpretation of the material. It's always good that you go read it. By no means is this even the ultimate truth. It's just another entity talking about the only thing that there is, which is reality. That being said, you are the one who knows what reality actually is. And there is no right or wrong. It is just a view of reality. It's like watching a movie and saying it was good or bad. It really is up to you. What do you think it is? You see? So that's it. That's my introduction here. As usual, just use your discernment. Never buy into anything that anybody says, including moi. And a good time also in the introduction to remind you that there are timestamps here if you want to skip into a specific question, if you're just revisiting the video, or just want to get to a specific question and want to skip the other ones. So that's all there for your pleasure. Now, we're going to start with the first question that Don has. And I've been including it because there is some extra information here. In the past, I used to skip it. Speaking of skipping. So here you go. First question. Don says, could you first give me an indication of the instrument's condition, please? Always the same question. Just like the last question was the same. I love that. I love that from the material. I never talk about it, but I think it's awesome that Don always asks the same questions at the beginning and at the end. Always about the instrument, Carla. You can see his love there. So Ra responds, this instrument's physical energy distortions are as previously stated. The vital energy level has become distorted from normal levels, somewhat downward, due to the distortion in this instrument's mind complex activity that it has been responsible for the, shall we say, difficulties in achieving the appropriate configuration for this contact. So the golden nugget here is within the mind complex activity, and I'll get to that. Physical energies are just like before. Vital energy has become distorted and kind of like lower. This is a little bit depression, okay? It's not that Carla was depressed, but depression in the strict meaning of the word. It is depressed, not uppressed, if you want to use it that way. Why is there a depression of vital energy? Because Carla had a mental activity of dissatisfaction with the contact because she blamed herself. It's basically what Ra says here. The mind complex activity that it has been responsible for the difficulties in achieving the appropriate configuration for the contact. That's because Carla felt bad that she had so many issues physically that she couldn't achieve proper configuration for contact. Little does she know that she is providing an awesome material here for us to read 40 years later and counting, 41. So yeah, you can see how just blaming yourself for any sort of activity like this decreases your vital energies. When you feel like you have I mean, this is the extreme, but you have no reasons to live, then your vital energies decrease and your body responds accordingly. Stress. This is why you can see that stress is the biggest killer in the world. It's not really heart disease or obesity or whatever it is. You know, all of that is caused by chronic stress, not only mental but physical as well, which is not the same as physical stress induced by exercises, which is obviously recommended all the time. Are you doing your exercises? Probably not. Are you eating your veggies? Probably not. I should probably eat more veggies. You see, all these things piled up, and it's a depression of vital energies. And not to worry about. I mean, we all gonna die someday, right? So pick your poison, but be aware of it. I guess that's the best I can summarize it. But yeah, you know, you have to be aware that whenever you feel that, you have to find out why. You know, what is the ideal that you have in mind that must be upheld, that must be maintained? I have to give the best configuration for the contact. You can see that's Carla's devotion, which is very strong. And I'm not criticizing, of course, I'm just giving my my critical view of this is that, of course, Carla had something to balance there because she was too devoted. And what does devotion mean? It means heart chakra. So what does it balance with? Wisdom. So there was potential for some balancing. That's what life is. You know, life is always bringing up the potentials for balancing whatever it is, whether that be our lower energy centers or our upper energy centers. So it's all about that, whichever way you want to see it. It's all about balance in life, being balanced. Balance means two things in equilibrium. Speaking of two, let's go to question 2. Don says in question 2, was the banishing ritual that we perform of any effect in purifying the place of working and screening from influences that we do not wish, meaning negative stuff? Ra says this is quite correct, so the ritual was effective. Don says, can you tell me what I can do to improve the effectiveness of the ritual? Ra says no. Don says, can you tell me what caused the instrument to become in a condition toward unconsciousness during the last 2 meditations prior to this one to such an extent that we discontinue them? Classic Ra. We can certainly say that or comment on it. And Don says, would you please tell me that? And here we go. Ra says, the entity which greets this instrument from the Orion group first attempted to cause the mind-body-spirit complex, which you may call spirit, to leave the physical complex of Yellow Ray in the deluded belief that it was preparing for the raw contact. You are familiar with this tactic and its consequences. The instrument, with no pause upon feeling this greeting, called for the grounding within the physical complex by requesting that the hand be held. So, even though I said I won't do a summary, I'll do it here just because there is some information that is relevant from previous sessions. But it seems that, let's just recapitulate what's happening here. So they did the banishing ritual, everything was fine. I can probably speculate a little bit and get into Don's mind by retracing what has happened. In the past 2 attempts for sessions, it seems like they had issues with trying to get into the trance state. And they noticed that, very perceptive to a degree, or maybe not, because in the next paragraph or the next questions, I don't know. We'll get to that. But what happened was that they couldn't get into the trance state and they couldn't initiate the raw contact. So Don seems to be worried about that. And asks, first, is the ritual, the banishing ritual, performed correctly, and is there no negative entity here? And Ra confirms and says, yes, it was effective. Then Don says, can you tell me how to improve the ritual? Ra says, no, we cannot. That's the law of Confucian, of course. We cannot infringe on your free will by telling you what to do. Then they go into the problem. It seems like a couple of sessions or attempts, they had issues getting into the trance state, and Carla became unconscious, which is different from trance, right? He said, toward unconsciousness during the last two meditations prior to this one, to such an extent that we discontinued them. So they had to discontinue them because she was unconscious. And so Ra explains that what happened in those two attempts was the following. The entity, that's the negative entity, which greets the instrument from the Orion group, first attempted to cause the mind-body-spirit complex, which you may call spirits, to leave the physical complex of yellow ray in the deluded belief that it was preparing for the Ra contact. It's interesting that they say, see, the wording here is to me interesting, because they say they cause the mind-body-spirit complex, which you may call spirit. So why would we call it spirit as opposed to mind-body-spirit complex? This is interesting. See, let me give you a bit of my own view on all of this. Because you see, I have to explain a little bit my view of non-duality. There is no other self. There's only the one self. And so any iteration that we can give of this self that apparently looks separate is an illusion. So why am I saying this? Because we can easily attach ourselves to the idea that we are a mind-body-spirit complex. Almost like saying, I am this body. We know that's not true. So if we are the self, the one self that exists, then you are not the mind-body-spirit complex, nor are you spirit. And you see, in the Law of One, it fits perfectly because they call the spirit a shuttle. Well, what is a shuttle for? For the self, yes. So if you can connect these dots and see what Ra says as to cause the mind-body-spirit complex, which you may call spirit, to leave the physical complex of yellow ray in the deluded belief that it was getting. So that's the part that I'm interested in. They try to cause the mind-body-spirit complex, which is this construct that is here, right? This window in which the creator sees itself, for the spirit to leave the physical complex. That means that once the spirit leaves, then the complex is available for negative time-space. You see, this construct, this metaphysical construct that is the mind-body-spirit complex, can be retrieved then. And this is my speculation. Please, this may change in the future, but this is how I see it. Because once you retrieve the mind-body-spirit complex and the spirit leaves, then yeah, it's available for manipulation. Typical with the negative ones. So, what is the physical complex of yellow ray? Is this body. And it's not just the body, but the mind, the way in which the mind is configured here. So indeed, the mind-body-spirit complex will, of course, be displaced. You see, it is not a personality. It is not a you, a soul. Even the soul is like calling the river a river. The river is not a river. The river is water. You're calling the water river, but the river does not stand out of itself from water. You see, these are very key components if you want to get into the Law of One, in the mystical aspect of it, and perhaps clear out these deluded ideas. You see, speaking of delusion, that you as a soul must be preserved. This is missing the point. And of course, it causes a further distortion in the mind to still believe that you are a sort of entity, that must survive. Even in the metaphysical world, you must survive. How many times have I heard this? I am shocked. Actually, I'm not shocked anymore, but I was shocked at the amount of metaphysical complexities that are taken out of this, extrapolated from the perception of the ego self, the spiritual ego. So yeah, whenever I take an opportunity or see an opportunity like this to clear out that there is only one being, and you can see it within the words here, or at least I can see it. Maybe, some other people say, no, this validates the fact that we're all separate, and that's fine. I don't care for that. I'm in love with unity because it's the only thing there is. So if you can't find it, then we're missing the point. Or, as religiously would say, we are sinning. We're missing the point. That's what sin is, by the way. Anyhow, Ra continues and says, you're familiar with this tactic and its consequences. Of course, we know that from the previous sessions, which I won't discuss. It's just what happened previously with Carla. The instrument, with no pause upon feeling this greeting, Carla, feeling this whole amalgamation of mind, body, spirit complex that they call the instrument, called for the grounding within the physical complex by requesting that the hand be held. So Carla, apparently, so Carla knew that something was going on, and she asked, hold my hand. By the way, this is something that Ra instructed them to do to maintain the instrument within the mind, body, spirit complex, or the spirit within the mind, body, spirit complex. Let's read more of what Ra says here. They say, thus the greatest aim of the Orion entity was not achieved. Of course, they wanted to displace the mind, body, spirit complex, which was beautiful. I mean, it's Carla's polarized vehicle. They keep saying, however, it discovered that those present were not capable of distinguishing between unconsciousness with the mind, body, spirit intact and the trance state in which the mind, body, spirit complex is not present. So apparently, if the Orion entity couldn't achieve what it wanted, which again was to take away Carla, big props to Carla and the team, right? After knowing that twice they had an issue and they knew it was the Orion entity, they kept on going with the raw contact. It's just admirable. I mean, it's that valor that nobody talks about, that bravery. I mean, I appreciate it. Some people may think it's foolish. You are right, that is quite foolish. But we owe a lot to the foolish people in the past who attempted to do those things that were ridiculously dangerous, and lo and behold, we learned a lot from them. I actually stand out as one of them by taking the chance of facing the cold, as Wim Hof recommended, and I'm so grateful for that. He was the fool who was laughed at for doing all these ridiculously dangerous things, and now we owe him so much. Wim Hof, the man, the myth, the legend. All right, so this was not achieved, but they discovered that those present, I suppose, Don and Jim, who else, were not capable of distinguishing between unconsciousness and with the mind, body, spirit intact and the trance state in which the mind, body, spirit complex is not present. Another interesting wording here. It's important when they mention mind, body, spirit and then mind, body, spirit complex. Let me go back a little bit. Okay. So, there is a difference between mind, body, spirit and complex, or mind, body, spirit complex. Just don't want to keep repeating the same words, but complex is within third density because you have the veil. And the veil creates all the archetypes for the experience of third density. I don't think the archetypes are taken into the higher densities. I could be wrong. That's not my department, but it seems like the mind, body, spirit intact, as they say. Let's reread, because Ra is talking about that Don and Jim weren't able to distinguish between unconsciousness with the mind, body, spirit intact. So that would be, I suppose, unconsciousness with the mind, body, spirit having no issues, and the trance state in which the mind, body, spirit complex is not present. So now they add the complex here. Sort of makes sense because the mind, body, spirit complex is our physical, I'm hesitating to say the word physical, with the third density present, right? Or the mind's perception of third density, right? So that is the mind, body, spirit complex present. When it's not present, it's like Carla. Because as you remember, Carla had no recollection of what happened. It was like she went to sleep, deep sleep, and came back. No recollection of dreams or anything, right? So that's a trance state with the mind, body, spirit complex not present. That's trance. That's how all the sessions in the raw material were channeled. Very uncommon. I don't think I've heard anybody doing this but Carla. And the other state was unconsciousness with the mind, body, spirit intact. Right? Just unconscious, but the mind, body, spirit seems to be intact. I can't really connect why they didn't say complex here. But I know that it refers to the essence, the core, the mind not influenced by the veil of forgetting, which is really what makes it complex. So that is unconsciousness with the mind, body, spirit intact. Not being away, I guess, just there. That's the key. So even though you're not there because you're unconscious, meaning you're not active, your mind, body, spirit is intact, which is really the true essence. The mind, body, spirit complex is it's a different animal. It's a different thing. So, all right, I'm picking too much on this. Let's move on. Ra finishes and says, therefore, it applied to the fullest extent the greeting which causes the dizziness, and in meditation without protection, caused in this instrument simple unconsciousness, as in what you would call fainting or vertigo. The Orion entity consequently used this tactic to stop the raw contact from having the opportunity to be accomplished. So, all right, just the typical behavior of a brat, of a spoiled child. That's what the negative entity did. It applied the fullest extent, to the fullest extent, the greeting, which causes the dizziness or attack. They use greeting, I suppose, in the touching, metaphysically touching of the instrument. In meditation without protection, caused this instrument simple unconsciousness. So basically just made her unconscious, as in you would call fainting or vertigo, I guess, causing this. The Orion entity consequently used this tactic to stop the raw contact, so just preventing the raw contact from happening. If I can't get what I want, I'll just disturb you until you can't establish any contact. That's it. That's all they did. So yeah, this is clearly something that happens when you are doing this type of work. We're going to get into that though. We'll probably cover half of this session, maybe a little bit more. We'll see as time goes on. But we're going to explore this a little bit more. Question 6, Don says, the instrument has scheduled an operation on her hand next month. If a general anesthetic is used to create the unconscious state, will this or any other parameters of the operation allow for any inroads by the Orion entities? It's a good question, actually. And Ross says, it is extremely improbable due to the necessity for the intention of the mind-body-spirit complex when departing the yellow ray physical complex to be serving the Creator in the most specific fashion. The attitude of one approaching such an experience as you describe would not be approaching the unconscious state with such an attitude. Okay, so what's the difference? Direction of service. That's what it is, the will to do it. That's what Carla represented there. First, the question is actually pretty good because Carla will go under anesthesia and become unconscious. So is there any possibility for an incursion by the negative entity to displace Carla, to do what they were trying to do here? Kill her, even. And Ra says it is extremely improbable. I suppose the only probability would be that for some reason Carla, well, this wouldn't be foolish, but just plain bizarre to me. I can't find a better word. But for Carla to go and say, all right, as I'm getting the anesthesia and going unconscious, I'm going to channel Ra for some reason so the doctors can hear Ra. I'm just making up stuff, but I'm trying to account for Ra's extremely improbable and not completely improbable. I guess there is a possibility, but very improbable. Due to the necessity for the intention, says Ra, of the mind-body-spirit complex, when departing the yellow ray physical complex, to be serving the Creator in the most specific fashion. Well, what is that most... Let's dissect this answer. Why? Well, the necessity for this to happen is that the intention of Carla, mind-body-spirit complex, when departing the yellow ray physical complex and going into a trance or unconscious state, to be in service to the Creator in the most specific fashion. Well, the most specific fashion is, as I explained, the possibility of getting into contact with Ra, right? That's a very specific fashion. And serving the Creator, again, can be misconstrued as serving the Creator in the most specific fashion as being the most important one. It's not. It's just a very specific. Just like, I don't know, a lady who does the laundry for all the family, she's serving the Creator in a very specific fashion. It's the same thing. Contacting Ra, doing laundry, or clipping your nails, or just, I don't know, jumping because you just wanted to jump for 2 minutes straight. All of these are serving the Creator. Why, Gabe? Why are we serving the Creator in such mundane activities? Because you are the Creator. And anything that you do is serving yourself. It's giving you experience. So it's impossible not to serve the Creator. It is in the wrong idea to think that I serve something external from me, that you can get this, oh, there is better service to this one Creator and there is lesser service. This is a fallacy. This doesn't exist. It's just the passion in which you serve the Creator. So we can get into a whole lot of nuances here, but I don't want to do that. And so just to clarify that, because the language may sound a little bit too intense in terms of what Carla was doing. So to summarize this first part of the paragraph, what they say is that it is very improbable because you have to have a huge intention to serve in a specific way which attracts this light. We'll talk about this light in a little bit. But that's important. Keep that in mind, that the very specific fashion that will attract a negative entity to cause this sort of work is that you want to channel this pure light, which Carla didn't do in the operation of the hand, of course. All of this is going to make more sense in the next question, but just keep that in mind. The mechanic will be revealed. The mechanic in which the negative entity can do a work on a mind-body-spirit complex. That mechanic will be revealed. Ra says the attitude of one approaching such an experience as you describe would not be approaching the unconscious state with such an attitude. Okay, that's... I have a pet peeve of using the same word in the same paragraph, and Ra apparently doesn't. That confuses me. The attitude of one approaching such an experience as you describe, so that would be getting into the trance state and in the conditions, which again we will talk about in the next question, that experience would not be possible. As you describe, would not be approaching the unconscious state with such an attitude, right? Because you have to have that attitude to approach that experience, that possibility. Yeah. So, in essence, it's not the same to, I don't know, get hit in the head with a club and go unconscious, and then negative entities come and work on you. I have to make this joke. I'm sorry, people, but I have to make this joke. A lot of people actually think that what they see in their mind is a sort of conflict, a chaotic conflict in the external universe. You see, this is all the metaphysical battles that are happening in people's minds, and they see all sorts of demons and archangels and flaming swords, and they go into all of this. I mean, that's a way to explore reality, and you are serving the creator for sure, let me say that. But I think it's funny when they say, I am doing a lot for this planet because I'm going out there to fight for the planet, as this actually exists. No, it exists within your own mind. It's your own story. It's your own experience. Don't share it with others, because what this causes, and it's funny, the effect that it causes, and I see this a lot more in my Spanish community, is that there is a sort of fear to the astral planes and to your own mind and to the demons and things that are attacking you and all this nonsense. So I think in my conclusions today, I will bring this up because I see it way too often. There is a sort of fear, a panic to the metaphysical, because there are negative entities and they will attack me and they will do things to me. Oh, I see them. I actually had a sort of automatic rejection with somebody recently, because how this person had what my friend actually coined spiritual conspiranoia. You know how we have conspiranoia here on Earth based on true facts. You know, all these things are real. However, the conspiranoia that creates in people, like, they're going to affect me, they're poison in the water, they're going to do this and all of this stuff, which is okay, I suppose, to feel that way. I'm not criticizing, but it does create this sort of, neurosis inside. And not that I'm against neurosis, but my job is to sort of help harmonize people's minds. That's what I feel better at, just harmonizing people's mind. I've always done it. It's not something that I decided to do. I remember when I was a kid, I did this, with cousins and friends, and I did it because it brought me joy. I mean, as a child, I was 9, 10-year-old kid, and I would do this because it was just pleasurable for me. It gave me joy. So, in the same way, we have a conspiranoia in the spiritual realms and the metaphysical and all the astral levels and all these things. Okay. But when I get people like that, I need to, break their illusion. And I know they want this illusion to be broken because they are obsessed by it. They're scared. And so, yeah. I'm using this as an example to please don't believe that if you go to sleep, negative entities are working on you. No. It's all your mind at that point. And let me explain why there is a mechanic here. Let's go to the next question. Don says, we have here, I believe, a very important principle with respect to the law of one. You have stated that the attitude of the individual is of paramount importance for the Orion entity to be able to be effective. Would you please explain how this mechanism works with respect to the law of one, and why the attitude of the entity is of paramount importance, and why this allows for action by the Orion entity? Beautiful, beautiful question. Ross says, the law of confusion or free will is utterly paramount in the workings of the infinite creation. That which is intended has as much intensity of attraction to the polar opposite as the intensity of the intention or desire. This is, I'm going to have a little bit of qualm would be an appropriate word, maybe, with the vocabulary here in the Law of One. And I'm going to introduce my own view of all of this. Be your own judge of my words and discern, please, discern with what I'm about to say as I go through this. A rather long answer, actually, is it? Yeah, it's kind of a 6 paragraph or so, 5 paragraphs, I don't know. Yeah, this is where the essence of this video is, definitely is. Let's go with Don's question first. Let me explain. Don wants to know, well, he notices that Ra says, you said that it's of paramount importance for the Orion entity to be effective, depending on the attitude of one who undergoes this work. Let's call the work the trance state into channeling Ra or channeling information and all of this, right? Because the intention of the work is to bring love light, distill love light in a way that is, it brings a ton of wisdom, just like the raw material does. You see, it brings a lot of wisdom. So that is important, the attitude. Now Don asks, please explain how this mechanism works with respect to the Law of One. How does this mechanism work with respect to the Law of One? Important part. And why the attitude of the entity is of paramount importance. And why this allows for action by the Orion entity. So 3 things Don wants to know. Keep this in mind. This is important. All right? Make notes. If you're taking notes, because I know some of you do, take these 3 notes. He wants to know the mechanism, how it works with respect to the Law of One. 2, the attitude of the entity, right? Why is it of paramount importance that the attitude of the entity be focused, concentrated, specific, right? And why this allows for the action of the Orion entity. That's the 3rd part. Why this allows the action of the Orion entity. And here I'll give of course, my interpretation, which hopefully helps you also to create your own interpretation. Okay, so now we have the whole question into in the panorama. So why all of this? All right. So Ra says the law of confusion or free will is utterly paramount in the workings of the infinite creation. First thing, law of confusion or free will. Let me give a bit of a clarification on a reflection that I gave, that I had recently. Why is law of confusion or free will? To me, free will is across the whole universe, across all densities, whereas law of confusion is only for 3rd density. So when Ra uses law of confusion, it's important to remember that it's not just the general free will, but free will within the veil creates confusion. And that is, we are separate. It's a very vivid sensation of being separate. I am in this body, and you are in that body. And this planet is a battleground for survival. That is the law of confusion working. So, within this confusion, you must become enlightened. Sorry to use that word. You must realize who you are. It's the same thing. That which is intended has as much intensity of attraction to the polar opposite as the intensity of the intention or desire. Aha. So when this is the attitude. Remember the question? Why is the attitude important? Because that which is intended, if you intend to be, the Dalai Lama or whatever, you intend to be, not that you intend to be, you cannot intend to be, you're selected, right? But I'm using it as a metaphor of being more in the perception of, because the Dalai Lama doesn't even know that he's a good person. He just is. People confuse that, and they think, oh, you have to be like him, or you have to be like Jesus or somebody like that. That's another fallacy. You have to be yourself with all your messiness and your whatever it is, whatever you describe yourself, in all your beauty and misery. That's what you have to be. So yeah, if you intend to be of service, I want to bring knowledge and love to people, and this is my intention, you will attract the opposite as well. You see? Because you're working on a polarized view. I want to do this for the benefit of the world. I'm not saying this is wrong. This is the dynamic tension that is created between positive and negative. You have to create all this work, but you must be aware that you will attract the opposite, the negative. So a very clear example of this is duality. When you say, I'm such a good person. For you to be a good person, you almost always obviate that you are creating bad people. I mean, you can only know you're good in contrast with bad. So there must be bad people. You don't say I'm a good person because animals are bad. You never say that. Or the planet is bad, the universe is bad. No, you contrast it with other people. So you're creating evil. You see, the way to hell are paved with good intentions. You see? So in the same way, attracting this sort of information is creating the polar opposite. And that will happen. That's okay. Just don't be surprised by it. Don't be shocked when you see that, and just enjoy it because you have created this new dynamic tension. Same thing that's happening here in the raw material. Where did I take that? Where Ron says, that which is intended has as much intensity of attraction to the polar opposite as the intensity of the intention or desire. Yeah, your desire or intention has a huge intensity on something, well, it'll have the same attraction. Duality, my friend. Electrons and protons. It's just a law of nature. Let's move on. Ra continues talking and says, thus, those whose desires are shallow or transitory experience only ephemeral configurations of what might be called a magical circumstance. Yes, of course. There is a turning point, a fulcrum, which swings as a mind-body-spirit complex tunes its will to service. If this will and desire is for service to others, the corresponding polarity will be activated. Aha. So, let's start with the transitory experience or shallow desires. I'm sorry, it is actually shallow or transitory desires. The experience is ephemeral. It's very not long lasting. You see, of the magical circumstance. Of course, if you don't have big intentions or anything, you're just going by whatever, there is no attraction there, you see, of magical circumstance. What is magic? Magic is the capacity to make changes in consciousness at will. So, yep, that's how it is. But there is a turning point, a fulcrum, which swings as a mind-body-spirit complex tunes its will to service. Yes, if this will and desire is for service to others, the corresponding polarity will be activated, service to self. So, if your will and desire is service to others, and you will attract the opposite polarity. I think it's clear by now that the more you want to be a goody person, then the more you will attract the other. And that's okay. You have to, I'm not saying that, avoid that. Don't do that. Just to be, it's like, what do they say? If you don't get people upset, you're not doing it right. That is the same thing. I mean, I don't like that saying because sometimes it's taken like, oh, so I need to piss people off. Then I know I'm doing something good. I mean, quite honestly, you are, because people don't get pissed off by you. They get pissed off because they are sensitive. They have a sort of weakness there, and you activate that. So in a way, yes, they're getting it right. But, it can be bastardized into just being a troll on the internet, which is annoying rather than, it's still constructive to a degree. I mean, trolls do have their place. Everything has a place in nature. But yeah, my point is that if you're not making people upset or angry, then you're not doing enough work. You're not pushing the envelope. You know what I mean? And again, this is not the point. The point is not to, not for me, but it's a consequence of you trying to push that envelope. I hope that makes sense. And you need to know it. You need to know that you're going to upset people. I have certainly upset fundamentalists in this path. Yes, quite a few fundamentalists. Not quite a few. I lie. I've just seen some people who get upset by, you're worshiping the demon Ra, something like that. Because Jesus is the only person that we should idolize. Not that I idolize Ra, of course, as this actual question will show, because I have not that I have anything against Ra, but I'll just give my own opinion that I think Ra could have included here, and I just want to include it. That's it. No big conflict. No conflict at all, actually. Okay, so now we're clear on that, right? We're going to attract that. Boom. Next, in the circumstance of this group, there are 3 such wills acting as one with the instrument in the, shall we say, central position of fidelity of service. So the will of the 3. Okay, I'll explain this. This is as it must be for the balance of the working and the continuance of the contact. Our vibratory complex is one-pointed in these workings also, and our will to serve is also of some degree of purity. This has created the attraction of the polar opposite, which you experience. So, a couple of things here. The first is that Don, Carla, and Jim these are the 3 wills acting as one, with the instrument in the middle, in the central position of fidelity to service, because she's the one who is channeling, taking the biggest toll on her body, and not so much her mind, I have to say. Carla's mind was quite unaffected. I think it was Don's mind that was affected over time. That's just my speculation, but yeah, Carla took the biggest toll here. I know, Don died, but throughout the Ra contact, the sacrifice was clearly Carla. And I'm not trying to measure who sacrificed more. That's stupid. But Ra, I guess I'm trying to go to Ra's point when they say that the instrument, Carla, was in the central position of fidelity to service. But the 3 of them were working, it's like 3 lasers together. It really intensifies that light of calling. It's actually not a calling, but a receiving as well, because dynamic between Carla and Ra in the group. So they say this is as it must be for the balance of the working and continuance of the contact. So you have to remain this way, otherwise we cannot contact you. Now, on the other hand, Ra, their vibratory complex is one-pointed in these workings also, and our will to serve is also of some degree of purity. Of course, their desire to be of service and to give this information is quite pure. And this is a huge beam of light. If I can visualize it this way, it's not really like, there's a spaceship out there and they're beaming lights, and Don, Carla, and Jim were beaming metaphysical lights. I don't see it that way. I just see it internally as the 3 of them wanting to receive this vortex of information, which they did. And so that purity will attract the polar opposite. And that's why they got the 5th density negative, because it had to match somewhat the intensity of this communication. So that's it. That is part of the mechanic. That's why all of this is important to answer Don's question. Let's keep going. Ross says, we may note that such a configuration of free will, one-pointed in service to others, also has the potential for the alerting of a great mass of light strength. This positive light strength, however, operates also under free will and must be invoked. So, short paragraph here, but important to keep on. Yeah. We may note that such a configuration of free will, that is the free will not only of Don, Carla, and Jim, but also of Ra. It was their free will to transmit the information. One pointed in service to others also has the potential for the alerting of a great mass of light strength. That is the positive one. This positive light strength, however, operates also under free will and must be invoked. So, not only so let me put it this way. Don, Carla, and Jim are the nexus, right? They're calling for pure wisdom and love, right? So this is matched by Ra. Ra is the one who says, oh, I can vibrate very specific with their own minds. It's almost like, you speak English, of course, otherwise you wouldn't be listening to this, but maybe you speak another language, and you are in the United States or Britain or Australia or whatever other English-speaking country, and you see somebody in distress speaking your native language, assuming you do. If not, just use English in a Spanish country or something like that. And you hear their call, you know that their vibratory complexes are a match for you. So you will say like, hey, I can help you. I speak your language. I can talk to you. So this is what Ra did, see? So Ra said, I can speak your language, so we will speak. And we have the configuration to do so. Translate the whole nine, let's do it. And the contact began, right? But there's also the alerting of a great mass of light strength. Not only does it attract the negative polarity in their own strength, but it also attracts the positive polarity as a sort of guardians. What do they call it here? However, operates in the free will, potential, alerting, great mass. I don't call it anything, actually. Positive light strength operates also under free will. So, all right, I'm calling it, this protection, insulation, you might call it. Insulation is probably a better word, metaphysically speaking, that it's going to insulate the contact. That is the banishing ritual, that is, calling onto Jesus and whatever else they used. That's why the rituals have to be very specific. Like for me, my parents who recently died, they are, just always in my heart. I just get a smile every time I think about them. And so they are part of my meditation whenever I go into my meditation. So we'll have our things, I think this is also a good point to remind you that the conversation that Don had with Ra, and talking about the rituals and if they're effective and all this, the takeaway was that no, rituals in and of themselves are not effective. They could, because they have very strong vibratory complexes, which means, certain words, and we know this in the United States with all our political language, that certain words are, they cause a sort of disturbance in people. The N word, the C word, and all these things. They cause a really shocking thing. So in the same way, there are powerful words that you can use, and they have an effectiveness in alerting, sort of metaphysically, some energies. Likewise, in black magic, you use certain words that I'm not aware of them, but I'm sure they have them. It's a sort of egregor, a thought form that is associated with that. But the key thing is your intention. How do you feel with that word? I can keep on going here because there are so many examples, but the point is that you create your own ritual. And now this operates under free will as well. It's not like you are surrounded by this all the time. You need to invoke it. And so you're also, as a spiritual seeker, whether you know it or not, you're invoking all of this subconsciously, because this this pull that you have to be listening to these type of podcasts or videos, this pull is not coming from, some external source, or you're being induced the raw material. It's yourself. Subconsciously, you're so attracted to this, and you're working towards the assimilation of this information. So you are invoking it, whether you know it or not. I mean, your mind is invoking it. Let's put it that way. I feel better with the mind invoking it, because it has undergone a specific reaction to the environment, to life, and it's had a consciousness expansion or spiritual awakening or whatever. So you have to be actively calling for this. So in the same way, you can call for angels and archangels and positive entities and whatever it is. You make up your own story in your mind. As long as the intention is to whatever it is that you want to do, then that's it. Intention is everything, right? Attention, attention, attention. Last paragraph. Ra says, "We could not speak to this and shall not guide you, for the nature of this contact is such that the purity of your free will must, above all things, be preserved. Thus you wend your way through experiences, discovering those biases which may be helpful." And that's all we got for that for this question. I think I'll cover two more. They're rather short at this point, right? Yes. Actually, 7.8 is a little bit long. We'll see. What do we get out of this? All the three questions out of done. Finally, this paragraph just says, the free will is important because you need to decide to do all of this stuff. So I cannot tell you what to do. That's just, again, what Ra is saying. So the three are the mechanism with respect to the law of one. That is the balancing. That's the first question that Don had. How does this mechanism work in respect to the law of one? Well, it is important because the attitude is free will and the balancing is part of the law of one. Why the attitude of the entity is paramount of importance, I think I just explained that ad nauseum. And then why this allows for action by the Orion entity, because the Orion entity is capable. I think this is actually responded in the next question. So let's just go to question 8. That last part gets expanded in question 8. But you can see already that the attraction of the Orion entity is because it needs to be balanced. If you are a good person, then you have to create bad people. And that's exactly what's happening here. It's a natural balance. I mean, it's an automatic balance, I should say. Natural, automatic, Tao. I introduce the word Tao here, and you'll see that there is no duality there. There is just one balancing thing all the time. That is the nature of things. But we're dissecting it. And so we need to speak as opposed to see or perceive. Okay, so last question that I'll cover. Last question 9. Let me just make sure. Question 9. It's actually pretty short. We'll see. Question 8. Don says, the negatively oriented entities who contact us and others on this planet are limited by the first distortion. They have obviously been limited by the banishing ritual just before. Could you describe, with respect to free will, how they limit themselves in order to work within the first distortion, and how the banishing ritual itself works? Good question. Ra says, this query has several portions. Firstly, those of negative polarity do not operate with respect to free will unless it is necessary. They call themselves and will infringe whenever they feel it possible. Secondly, they are limited by the great law of confusion in that, for the most part, they are unable to enter this planetary sphere of influence and are able to use the windows of time-space distortion only insofar as there is some calling to balance the positive calling. Once they are here, their desire is conquest. So, big paragraph here. How are they able to work within the first distortion while not respecting free will? It's a little confusing, actually, even to me. The first part that Ra covers is that the negative polarity, those of the negative polarity do not operate with respect to free will unless it is necessary. So they don't allow, this is the thing, they don't allow free will to operate, right? So in a way, they're bending free will to their own benefit. But this is the key thing that I see here. They do not operate with respect to free will unless it is necessary. Yes, so usually they're just trying to bend your will to theirs. See, a lot of people think like, oh, they're manipulating me. No, they're not. You're just not aware in how they're manipulating you. Even when you say, I know everything about the elite, they want to manipulate us. Well, they want to, but they can't, right? I mean, it's your free will. Oh, but they seduce me with all this candy and electronics and paved roads and cities and operas and all the beauty, and now they want to take it away. Well, they gave it to you, and if they want to put rules, then you want to keep playing by their rules, or do you want to go and do something else? It's okay to play by the rules and just say, yeah, whatever, I give up my free will in this way, and it is fine. It's fine. I think there's too much war right now between, I'm awakened, you are asleep, sheeple. So stupid at this point, but it happens. It'll continue to happen. But yeah, people are asleep. So what? That's what makes people are actors. They're enacting some sort of persona here. There's only one creator, so what are you concerned about? It's different experiences. I can go on with this, but the point is that the negatives, they do not operate with respect to free will, meaning that they don't respect people's free will. They want to bend them to their own. They call themselves and will infringe whenever they feel it possible. Right. That explains it. Secondly, they are limited by the great law of confusion, in that, for the most part, they are unable to enter this planetary sphere or influence and are able to use the windows. Right, the law of confusion is this veil of forgetting. You have to work with what you perceive. So the person needs to choose, the spirit needs to choose without being told. You cannot seduce somebody, and try as you may, unless they have the tendency towards that, you will see that it's not possible to try to convince somebody. You can never tell them anything that they already don't know. So, for the most part, they are unable to enter this planetary sphere of influence, and that's the law of confusion, right? And are able to use the windows of time-space distortion. These are the windows that are open in the quarantine, which is another monster that I won't talk about. Not a monster, but a beast. Not a beast. Another wall of explanation that I won't get into. The quarantine. How does it fit with all of this? It's not necessary. The only important thing is how they do their work. And their work is through that, just what they want to do and how they are limited. They are limited by the law of confusion greatly. And they can only work insofar as there is some balance calling for the positive ones. So whenever there is positive calling, then they can come and do their negative work. Once they're here, their desire is conquest. Of course, they want to bend people's will to their own as much as possible. Let's read the next paragraph, and I think this is the end. Ross says, thirdly, in the instance of this instrument's being removed permanently from this space-time, it is necessary to allow the instrument to leave its yellow ray physical complex to its free will. Interesting. Thus, trickery has been attempted. The use of the light forms being generated is such as to cause such entities to discover a wall through which they cannot pass. Gandalf. This is due to the energy complexes of the light beings and aspects of the one infinite creator, invoked and evoked in the building of the wall of light. Oh my god, I'm sorry. The nerd in me. Doesn't Gandalf say, I am a servant of the secret fire of honor? The secret fire. This is the light. By this secret fire you cannot pass Balrog of Udun. Wow. I love the Lord of the Rings. Does that show it? So you cannot pass by this wall of light. Oh, I love it. Anyhow, I think they're explaining how they could. What did Don ask that they go to? They went to the removal. They have obviously been limited by the banishing ritual. Could you describe? Yeah, he didn't ask specifically that, but they said, all right, in the instance of these instruments being removed permanently from the space-time, that is what they were trying to do, it is necessary to allow the instrument to leave its yellow ray physical complex of its free will. Right. So Carla, or the instrument, the spirit, must have desired to leave the physical complex, with trickery. What trickery is this? The use of the light forms being generated is such as to cause such entities to discover a wall through which they cannot pass. I already talked about that with Gandalf. This is due to the energy complexes of the light beings and aspects of the one infinite creator invoked and evoked in the building of the wall of light. That to me is talking about the quarantine and the windows that are open for balancing. Because when people look for either light or darkness, the appropriate opposite must be invoked as well, or channeled. Those were the windows to me. So they're just explaining that. There's not much to say there. Explaining how this works. I won't get into details because that's the quarantine and all of that, and it's kind of irrelevant to what I was talking about. You know what? I'll cover. I keep saying I won't, but that way, we're 9 questions in, precisely in the middle, and it's just everything that Don says here is a yes, a resounding yes from Ra. So keep that in mind. Don says in question 9, everything that we experience with respect to this contact, our distortion toward knowledge in order to serve the Orion entity's distortion toward the attempt to reduce the effectiveness of the service. All of this is a result of the first distortion, as I see it, in creating totally free atmosphere for the creator to become more knowledgeable of itself through the interplay of its portions, one with respect to another. Is my view correct with respect to what I just said? And Ra says, like I said, yes. And that concludes the reading for today on session 72. Not before I give a little bit of an insight into what Don said here, which in essence, I know it sounds very complex, but what Don is saying here, basically all that we're doing is the creator knowing itself through its different portions, which is Don, Carla, Jim, Ra, negative entity, angels, archangels, Jesus, and so on and so forth. All of these are aspects within our minds. But the mind is not the creator. The creator experiences itself through the mind. You see, so it's like a kaleidoscope. I keep calling it a kaleidoscope because it's just a different arrangement of colors and lights and creates these beautiful illusions of experience. So that's what Don said. If you reread it, that's what Don said. And yes, it's a very complicated way to say. So basically the creator is knowing itself thanks to my interaction. Yes, the creator is knowing itself through all of us. And the only thing that may skew sometimes the view of people is that we talk about the intensity of light being channeled here this is a great point for conclusions. You see, sometimes we become infatuated with the idea that, we're here to bring light. I am a light warrior. I'm here to cast aside the darkness. I am the envoy of God. I am the the vassal of the armies of light and all of this. That to me is just, it sounds very poetic and so on. I'm not attracted at all to all of that, at all. What I see there is the spiritual ego attaching itself to, let me be good, let me be righteous, let me put into order this universe. Not that it's bad, not that it's negative even on itself, but it's what it is. And you see, here's my little difference, or inclusion. It's not a difference, but inclusion into all of this is that if you do good things, you accumulate good karma. If you do bad things, you accumulate bad karma. Whatever that line, division is between good and bad, you're always doing these things. I am particularly interested with the ceasing. It's a mechanism, because that doesn't mean that I don't accumulate good or bad karma. It's just that I don't care about it. You see, I'm not worried about it. And a lot of people are. A lot of people are super interested. How do I get rid of my bad karma? How do I accumulate good karma? Well, why do you care? Who is the one that is spinning around in this initial axis of the wheel of karma, or the wheel of becoming? Samsara. Why? Why do you care so much to get into there? Because, it shows that we want to continue to do actions with motivation. That's what karma is. But I, particularly Gabriel Lugo, as the vibratory complex, sound complex, describes this thing here, mind, body, spirit complex. This thing is interested in harmonizing the mind, liberating the mind, actually. Well, what is liberation? Not doing anything. Not doing anything with motivation. You will find out that you continue to do things. And you say, well, this this show keeps on running, even if I, the separate self, am not involved. And how peaceful it is. What a harmonious life this is. Because you're not worried. Some people look at this and say, you just want to become non-active and passive and let all things happen. Are you doing anything to prevent them? All you're trying to do is control it. Why would you want to control it? Because I want things to be this way. People are afraid to go inside and look at why you want things to be one way. Why? It shows that you have a desire. It shows that you have a sort of tendency for painting the world in your own colors. Why would you want to do that? I'm not saying it's bad, but question it, because that is the root of all frustration. Trying to control the world. Trying to play God. You are God already. Don't try to play it. Why would you want to play yourself? You see? I can go on. But the point is that I see all of this as, I'm grateful for the raw material, for Hitler, for the Dalai Lama, as I mentioned, or whatever. I'm grateful for everything, because it has created a show. The illusion of transformation in planet Earth. So these mechanisms, it's not that we need to abolish them. This is the reason why non-duality is not popular, believe it or not. We're just interested. You see, we non-dual, whatever, I don't want to put a title to us. Just us people interested in law of one and non-duality, because that's what the law of one is. Don't mistake it with, mind, body, spirit complexes and demons and Orion group and all of this. It's like mistaking Jesus's words. And this is where I have my little thing. Of course, I can talk for hours. Ra couldn't do it, so they have to pick a language. But just like Jesus used the language of, Satan or demon or whatever, sometimes he would use that language. It's because it was useful. In the same way, for Ra, this language is useful to talk about all these things. But in the end, none of it really matters. None of this stuff really matters, honestly. It's all about getting in touch with that unity. See, and that's what Ra wanted to talk about so much. But Don asked questions around metaphysics, and we got a lot of metaphysical stuff. But I guarantee you, if somebody else who was interested in more knowing the self, this Ra material would have been different. So I'm not criticizing it. Again, I love the material as it is. Like I said, I love Hitler. I love anything because it's just been one show on planet Earth. And yes, Trump, Biden, all of them are part of this. And you have to love them both. If you can't, you're still polarized and creating bad people. Which is okay. Like I was saying, that's the key thing. That very few people are interested in non-duality, in unity consciousness. Let's put it that way. Some people are attracted because they say, I'm going to beat the game by getting unity consciousness. They're missing the point, but it's okay. They're welcome because eventually is the ego that dissolves. That same ego that decided, I'm going to get some benefit out of non-duality. So, based on this, that there is not much interest in non-duality, you can see that we just want to talk about this source, the source of all mechanics, because therein lies the harmony that everybody's looking for. And this is why, especially in Zen, it's a joke. It's always a joke. It's a mockery of everything, not a malicious one, but just, it's funny. It's funny that you come here to tell me that you are distressed because you are God. It's funny to me. I can see through you. I can smile at the absolute self, at the Brahman in you, and the ego saying, I'm suffering. So, it's all very funny. It's humorous. So I acknowledge here that people are going to continue to climb the ladder, which is really a hamster wheel. That's the ladder they're climbing. And that makes the world go round. All sorts of personalities and people and all of it going on. But the funny part is when they say, I don't have peace of mind. Well, that's because you're using your mind. What do you expect? You won't have peace of mind. Because the mind is disturbed by its own nature. It's like ripples in the water. That's what I get mostly out of this session. That's what it inspired me to talk about. But this is it. Not the session. There's more to talk about in this session, but that'll be next video. Thank you again. This is the end of this video. Like I said, I already talked about why there has been no videos or very few videos around lately. I'm working on so many projects right now. This is the point where I'll just ask you to consider working with me or supporting me in any other way. For now, as I get my own bearings into a sort of flow of work to continue to do this for YouTube, Spotify, whatever, all of these things that I do just out there in the open, because this is my dedication. So you don't have to. This will continue to come out, but any contribution is greatly appreciated. And of course, one of the biggest contributions is to work with me, because I learn a lot. Teach, learn, teach. That's what I do. All right. Thank you so much for being here with moi. I appreciate you, my other self. And I'll see you in part 2 of session 72.